When the committee was putting this one together, we thought, what better place to discuss the intersection of music, sports, entertainment, and branding than LA. So with that, our final panel, Innovation and Authenticity, Building Enduring Brands in a Noisy World. Please join me in welcoming Chris Hetherington, owner and CEO of Fathead, Dave Mays, CEO and founder, Breakbeat Media, Wendy Starland, co-founder and president, MusicSoul, and our moderator, Zack Ellison, CFA CAIA, founder and managing general partner of Applied Real Intelligence.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, so this is going to be my favorite panel of the day, even though there were some great ones earlier. For what it's worth, I used to be on the board of CFA LA, so it's always a lot of fun coming back. I'm now living in Florida, but Santa Monica and LA remain like a second home. So yeah, this is a very exciting panel. We're talking to three amazing business builders that I know personally that all have incredible stories. And so I wanted to actually start by having them introduce themselves and kind of like their origin story. How did they get here? Because they've all done some amazing things before they got to this stage in their career. And now they're kind of taking that next step in their evolution. So Wendy, we're gonna, Wendy, we're gonna start with you.
Great.
You have an amazing background and I would love for you to share kind of how it all began and then talk later about MusicSoul.
Sure. My name is Wendy Starland. Thanks so much for having me here, Zack. I am best known, I discovered and developed Lady Gaga from an unknown artist into $1 billion brand. And that process took about 4.5 years, building it literally from the ground up. And now I have taken that experience and wanted to fix a broken music industry. Right now, if you have 1 billion streams in the music industry, you're one of the biggest artists in the world, that means you made less than $45,000 for 1 billion streams, which is ludicrous, as we all know. So now I have worked with a technologist, an incredible man named A.R.I, who has $14 billion in exits from the AI-driven technologies he's created and sold. And we created a music ecosystem, a super app that combines music streaming and a marketplace. And it drives, through AI, drives mass promotion from the brands to the artists or users, influencers, any kind of user. And through data matching and AI baked into our system, it automates the engagement and gives the user 70% of streaming and advertising revenue. So this is like the Uber for media. With Uber, if you have a car, you have a job. Now, if you make music or videos, you've got a job because you no longer have followers, because we'll throw 150 million eyeballs at you from, for example, Estee Lauder, or 100 million eyeballs at you from Home Depot, or whoever your data matches with, and then give you 70%. So this has been the evolution from discovering and developing Lady Gaga, how we built those brands, and making all of those processes accessible to the public.
And next, Dave Mays. So Dave's got a special place in my heart because when I was growing up in the 90s, I was very into hip-hop culture, and he founded The Source magazine, which was basically the definitive magazine for rap and hip-hop ever, right? And basically Dave found and popularized many of the folks that we now consider icons, like Jay-Z and Eminem and many others. And so I always really enjoyed reading that magazine. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the best-selling magazine in the world, outselling Rolling Stone. So it was truly iconic. And now Dave's doing things that are even bigger, kind of revolutionizing the podcast industry But Dave, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the origin story and like how you founded the Source out of your dorm room at Harvard and how you brought hip hop culture to the world.
All right. Well, leave me a little bit to tell.
Sorry.
No, but thank you. Happy to be here to see you guys, and thank everybody, CFA LA and Zack for having me. I grew up in Washington D.C. Fell in love with kind of the music and the culture of the city in the 70s and the 80s, and ended up going to Harvard as an undergrad in 1986, which happened to be around what most people would call the emergence of the golden era of hip hop. This is when Run DMC had become an international superstars selling music in all over the world and touring Japan and many countries, and hip hop was becoming the voice of a young generation of us, growing up, and it was attracting people of all, races, ethnicities, socioeconomic classes, and it also was a very inspirational music and culture in the sense that it was very much rooted in social and political thought. So for me, I learned a lot in those days from some of the artists that were speaking about some of these issues and topics, things like, KRS-One telling you that Columbus didn't discover America, and that there was a civilization of people that lived here, and things of that nature that have become more widely thought about and talked about in the years later. But hip hop has always been kind of on the cutting edge of culture and really thinking. So I created a Source as a one-sheet newsletter out of my dorm room when I was a sophomore at Harvard. Built it up for a couple of years from inspired by the story of Rolling Stone and Jan Wenner, how he created this iconic brand and magazine from an underground newspaper in the late 60s, and saw a lot of parallels between rock and hip hop in terms of how they were viewed by mainstream society as these music forms that were ruining the youth of America. But I saw that hip hop was going to be bigger because, again, it was sort of being embraced and loved by everybody, all young people at that stage, and, has continued to this day. So I was always an entrepreneur, started it, built it up while I was in college for 2 years, was able to move down to New York City when I graduated, open a small office and, build it up throughout the 1990s. And started the Source Awards, the first award show for hip hop, which was a very successful televised show for many years, and many other things, some of which Zack touched upon. But I always saw and continue to see today hip hop as something that has this incredible power to, again, kind of cut across the lines that typically divide us in our world, and bring us together. So in recent years, I've been working on launching, kind of what I call the 3.0 version of the Source in today's, more modern digital technology space. I've started in podcasting, which I think, more and more people are recognizing now how powerful that medium is becoming. And I think it's going to just continue to grow and flourish. And, as all the forms of traditional media continue to just kind of decline, go away, podcast is going to rise and is going to, remain to be a really, integral part of our society and world. So we're kind of, on the cutting edge of that, creating podcasts that speak, to this culture and to this community in authentic ways across a spectrum of subjects, not just music. I mean, we have a cooking show with Trick Daddy called Trick I Got My Pots. We have a show that focuses more on mental health in a way called Trappin' Anonymous. And it's just all about hip hop as more of a perspective and a culture on the world that those of us who've grown up with it tend to share these sort of similar ways of looking at the world. So podcasting is the foundation, but what I'm building with Breakbeat is ultimately about creators and kind of trying to revolutionize this creator economy, because everybody's talking about the creator economy and how big it is. But similar to what Wendy was saying with music, creators are being exploited. The vast amount of value that is being created by people who upload content to Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, what have you. Is the value is being, the value is being heavily weighted towards the platforms. The creators are really, making very, very little money and little of the value. They don't own their stuff. There's no transparency. So ultimately, the podcast network and the community that I'm building of bringing the people that love hip hop and have this sensibility that they've gained through their love of hip hop together through content. We're going to elevate into a technology platform that we hope to launch next year, which will be incorporate blockchain as one technique to be able to track the value. So when things get shared and go viral, there's ways that everybody gets their fair share. Decentralized social media is another area that we're looking at very closely, again, as a way where creators can own their content. So a lot of people may not know this, but Instagram, people might build up 1 million followers on Instagram, and they're making a living out of it. They're not getting what they deserve, but they're making a living. But you can wake up the next day and Instagram can delete your page. Your 1 million followers are gone. You have no recourse. They don't, give you a way to get them back. You don't have those people's contact information, their emails or anything. It's all gone. You're back to square one. It's just not an equitable situation. And so it's similar again to music, but creatives typically, get exploited, and hip hop has had that, vision of trying to, ownership, entrepreneurialism. These are things that came from hip hop and have transferred into the subsequent generations. Ultimately, Breakbeat is a content and technology company for the global hip hop community, and we're doing extremely well in the podcast space and growing, and very excited about the future.
So Dave, I want to just ask a quick follow-up before we get to Chris. Remember when TikTok was having those issues and they shut it down for a minute and people were freaking out? The whole creator economy was wondering where their livelihood was going to go. And so, I think about this a lot because media is shifting, where we used to have gatekeepers, which were the big, the big production companies, the music labels, and now it's really shifting to what you call the creator economy, where individuals have more autonomy and more power and can kind of shape their destiny much more easily. But it hasn't shifted as much as we might think, because to your point, now they're beholden to Instagram and TikTok and a few other platforms, and they don't own anything that they're really putting out there, right? And they're not earning what they deserve, right? Which is a problem that both Wendy and you are solving with your businesses. So I think what you're doing has been a long time coming, but there's still a long way to go, right?
Yeah.
So, Chris, I wanted to talk about how you have taken a brand that was already kind of iconic in a sense, and have really kind of rebuilt and revitalized and rejuvenated the business, which is a little bit different from Wendy and Dave, who kind of built it from scratch. But one thing I'll say about you is every time your name comes up, people love you. Right? Anytime your name comes up, people have so much respect for you as a business builder, which is a little bit unique for ex-athletes like yourself, right? You played 11 years in the NFL, and there's a lot of folks that have NFL experience or NBA experience, but they never really gained that business respect that you have. And so I wanted you to just talk a little bit about your background, because I think it's pretty phenomenal, going from Yale to the NFL to hedge funds to now CEO and owner of Fathead, but also how you're rejuvenating the brand with some of like the data and technology that you bring to the table?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I think, first of all, it's a lot easier to grow a business that you're very passionate about, right? Like, I'm just elated to be back in sports again. Leverage these relationships I built over the last 25 years. My backstory, I grew up in Connecticut, a little small town in Connecticut. Went to Yale University for undergrad. Don't hold me against that. We were 2-2 against Harvard when I was there. And then, look, I came into Yale as a two-sport. I played football and baseball at Yale. I came in as a running back safety. They ended up moving me into quarterback my freshman year. Never played quarterback in my life. So I ended up playing quarterback all 4 years and then came out as a athlete, so to speak, and ended up signing as an undrafted free agent rookie to Cincinnati originally. And they moved me to fullback. And, I'd never blocked anybody in my life. And so that was kind of my, what am I going to do here? I gotta reinvent myself. I gotta go from this, quarterback that's got his, hands on the ball every play to someone that has a different role. And that's, as we talk later on, that's been a key for me, just constantly being okay with reinventing myself, with adapting to the circumstances. And so, I ended up playing 11 years for 5 different teams and had just a wonderful experience. Had a lot of adversity during that time. Played hurt a lot. And for me, it was really important just to be a great teammate, be accountable, to my organization, my coaches, play hurt, because mainly I was fearful I was going to get cut. But just an awesome experience. But after 11 years, I tried to play a 12th year and it didn't work out. And unfortunately made fullback money and not quarterback money, so I had to go to work for a living. But I was like, all right, shoot, what am I going to do next? And so I ended up taking the executive programs at Harvard and Wharton, and really, was trying to figure out what I can take those traits that I learned in the NFL and make those systems for business, whether it's, resiliency, grit, consistency, discipline. Sounds cliche, but from my standpoint was real. And so how do I take those traits and pour all my energy and passion into something else? And so I ended up joining a hedge fund in 2008, which, as you guys know, was a crazy time. I didn't even know what an option was when I joined this hedge fund. And I just kind of dove in and was okay with reinventing myself and had a crazy growth mindset. And look, I'm going to work twice. Sounds cliche. I'm going to work twice as hard as the next person and learn as fast as I can, and really dive in and be okay with getting mentors in my life. And so I ended up becoming, in 11 years, I ran 3 businesses for those guys and moved over to Tokyo and ran a business there into that big earthquake and tsunami in 2011, which was, again, a crazy experience. Came back, launched a fairly large co-invest fund underneath the hedge fund umbrella, and worked through that for about 5 years. And we had some good success there. And then got more involved in the private equity venture capital side of our business. So had a couple CEO roles of companies that we invested in as a fund. And then was really in the right place at the right time to have an opportunity to put together a group of partners and athletes to buy Fathead, and at the end of 2023. The business wasn't for sale. The story is Dan Gilbert owned this brand for a long time, and Dan owns the Cleveland Cavaliers, Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans, StockX, and he had some pretty major health issues about 5 years ago. And so one of his mentees from the Quicken Loans days took it over, and he just wasn't a sports guy, didn't have the relationships, but was still running a very nice business. We had 194 licenses in sports and entertainment, every major sports league, all the players associations, NASCAR, WWE, most of the entertainment IP, Disney, Hasbro, Mattel, Nickelodeon, Star Wars, NBC Universal, 2 million email subscribers, over 300,000 SMS subscribers. I'm like, man, I feel like I'm starting on third base, And so we really dug in, took a deep look underneath the hood of this business and really understood how this business works, who's our partners. We had a lot of licenses. We had 55,000 SKUs on the website. So we hired an incredible product team to look at the historical sales data over the last 5 years, and we trimmed about 28,000 SKUs. Every licensor went through a scorecard process, typical 80-20, right, with our top 20 licenses, doing about 80% of the revenue. We were a print-on-demand business, didn't carry an inventory, so I came in, okay, FedEx, we're reducing our cost of delivery by 30%, or you were going to look for somewhere else to do our printing and shipping. And so just kind of, constantly chipped away at the business, understanding the unit economics and really laying the foundation for sustainable and profitable growth, which, as you guys know, is the key. And so it's been an interesting exercise, and we have a really amazing brand. As everyone knows, the hardest thing to do is to build a brand. We already had a brand, and we needed to reintroduce that brand to culture. And most people 20 and above were very familiar with our brand, but my 11-year-old son, who's a maniac athlete, had no idea what Fathead was. So the day I bought the business, I ordered him a life-size Christian McCaffrey decal, and he thought it was the coolest thing ever. And the next thing was all his friends want them and make custom decals for their baseball team, and it started to spread like wildfire. And so, the key for us is we're in a really cool category. We're in sports. Fandom has never been bigger. We're capturing these moments that are happening in sports and entertainment and life, right? We have a big part of our business, which is about 36% of our revenue, is the custom side. So, again, my son wins the Little League championship, birthdays, graduations, bar mitzvahs. We sell a lot of pets, right? So it's really a rewarding, venture for me, because we're really creating emotional connections between fans and what they love, and that's their heroes or athletes. And I always say, just because you're not a fan of the NFL or the NBA or MLB, you're certainly a fan of your family, and trying to capture these wonderful moments that are happening with your family's life. And so it's been a great experience. As you guys know, the best brands innovate. The best brands try to move at the speed of culture, but also try to get ahead of trends. And so we bought a technology company early on where these decals have become portals to trigger content and storytelling and experiences, which is going to be really fun. We have global expansion plans. We have distribution plans. We just got approved on Walmart, Target, Lowe's, Amazon, Lids. We're going to be in a bunch of the team stores, and so we're tackling the X's and O's of the business. We're hiring an amazing team, and for me, again, selfishly, I love being back in sports again. It's been really rewarding.
So let's talk a little bit more about brand building, because I think that ties into the investment, the investment folks in the room. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is the power of influencers and the power of celebrity-led brands. And this hasn't been announced yet publicly, but next week, my company will be announcing that we're the lead investor to probably the best-selling musician of all time, and his brand, and so I spent a lot of time with these folks that are very, very influential, as you guys all are, and I don't think that the market on the investment side really understands yet how powerful that can be when you have 200 million people that are looking at what you're doing every single day, right? It's a lot more powerful than a Super Bowl ad, right? Or a halftime performance at the Super Bowl, right? It can be completely game-changing. But I want to talk a little bit about how you all are thinking about building brands in this modern era for your businesses, but also tapping into the power of these creators, right? That are now each businesses in and of themselves. So Wendy, why don't we start with you? And maybe you could even talk a little bit about what worked as you were helping build and develop Lady Gaga. Like her first album, wasn't that like the album of the decade?
It was Billboard's album of the decade, spent 108 weeks at #1. Yay! So happy that worked out.
Yeah.
We were sweating it out for a few years before that album came out, and she got dropped from her first record label. So the fact that we got us another record deal after she got dropped, and then it became Billboard's album of the decade was truly a great moment to celebrate.
So what was it that worked as you were building her brand, and what's changed now that in the modern environment that you would do differently?
Well, I mean, one thing that I also really have in common with Dave over here, who's just a genius guy, is that we both attacked sort of our niche in the marketplace, even if that niche was a big niche. Lady Gaga, when I first discovered her, the biggest person on the radio was Norah Jones. Everything was pretty and soft and safe. And I said, we got to take a direct left turn. That is completely saturated. We've got to go into the part of the marketplace which is not saturated at all. Edgy, bold, something that you can't take your eyes off of. And so I said to myself, okay, Wendy, well, let me sort of let her dress up like a car crash and make everyone a rubbernecker so that she gets the attention without being compared to these people who are trying to be sexy or trying to be, very beautiful. I said, let's have her get the attention. I said, okay, well, who dresses like this? Well, we were in New York City at the time, and at the clubs, there were a lot of drag queens who were dressed in this very flamboyant style. So I said, okay, Wendy, well, who is who's a big popular icon in this community? Freddie Mercury of the band Queen. All right, Wendy, well, what is one of Queen's big songs? Radio Gaga. Okay, well, I think I love the Gaga. Let me steal the Gaga, but it's not a radio, it's a lady. So Lady Gaga. Here's your new name. And so it became part of this strategy to A, differentiate the image, B, there was zero dance music on the radio at the time, zero. Maybe in Europe, but certainly not in the US. And so creating a sound that was gonna A, match with the image of it, and then carve out a piece of the marketplace, because the fact is that we couldn't have gotten more no's. Everyone just told me, Wendy, like, you're crazy. What, you're taking this girl into my office is dressed up like in these crazy outfits. And I said, this is exactly what needs to happen to shake up the current environment. So I don't believe in following the trends. I believe in trying to set them. And I know that you did that with The Source, and I have so much respect for you because of that. And I think that's what you do, with stocks. You buy low and you sell high, and that's what you've got to do with culture to really make a difference.
And a key part of that is authenticity. And that's what I think is going to be the big differentiator now between brands that make it and those that don't, in terms of celebrity-led. Because there's a lot of celebrities that attach their names to things, right? Everybody's doing their own, like, tequila, et cetera. And it's, most of those will not do that well. I mean, of course, we hear about the ones that have done really well, but there's many, many people who have tried and failed. And I think that's because they weren't grown organically and authentically, right? And Dave, I want to talk to you a little bit about that in terms of, like, authenticity, because that's such a key part of hip hop, right? If you're not authentic, you're not going to have staying power. So maybe talk a little bit about that in today's environment.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, authenticity, like you said, has always been sort of like the core value in the hip hop world. In today's world, it's a little different because, social media, it's all about kind of like projecting an image, showing, trying to make yourself look a certain way on social media. And it's kind of, allow people to just sort of amplify a lot of things that may not be that authentic. But what attracted me to podcasting is it's a medium where authentic voices can be heard, and where people are turning to find authentic voices, find voices that they're not finding in other forms of mainstream media. So it's a longer form, piece of, a media form, as opposed to like social media being primarily short form, 30-second videos, 60, 90-second videos. But with podcasts, it gives people a chance. We have an average watch time of 20 or 30 minutes on our YouTube channel for most of our podcasts. So it's the one medium where long form content is still really being consumed and engaged. That's what it's providing, is a platform for voices. So I just did the same thing that I'd always done, staying true to the culture and being in the culture and of the culture. That's really the only way you can truly be authentic in something like hip hop, is if you're part of it. And that was always a strategic kind of advantage I felt that I had, because I wasn't just, even though I went to Harvard and I had the credentials, to look that part, I was when I was at Harvard, I spent more time in Roxbury or Dorchester than I did in Harvard Yard. So just staying in touch with the people, with the pulse of the community, has always been, key for me, and being able to take those voices and take the true voices of the people and create platforms where those voices and those perspectives can get out there to a bigger audience.
So I was thinking about how entertainers, musicians mainly, were the most influential in many cases. And now I think athletes have always been incredibly influential as well. But now I think because of social media, their influence has multiplied exponentially. So Chris, I wanted to ask you a little bit, as a former athlete who still is very closely tied to many current athletes, and obviously Fathead is focused on the sports market. What is it that builds that emotional connection? So, because that's super important for a brand, to have that emotional connection. And a lot of people have a lot of emotional connection to musicians, but also to athletes. And so how do you maintain that and build that for Fathead?
Yeah, I mean, in general, we live in an attention economy, right? And our kind of thought is, you can't sell anything to anybody unless you get their attention. And so there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, our brand in particular, back in the day, it was everywhere. It was all over TV commercials and Super Bowl ads and ESPN. And to Dave's point, in today's world, it's very different. It's about social selling, live selling, influencer partnerships, affiliate partnerships, et cetera. And so for us, it's like, how do we bridge that emotional connection? How do we bring fans closer to what they love and honor these heroes that they have? And so we obviously have the NFL PA license, we have the NBPA license, we have the MLB, et cetera. We have all the college licenses. And so how do we highlight those athletes in a very authentic way to honor fandom? It's basically what it boils down to. And I think, of course I was an athlete, but I think climbing above the situation and understanding, who are the best ambassadors of our brand, and I, to your point, Zach, I think athletes are very good at that if it's done in the right way. And look, I'm not going to go out and buy a product that Aaron Rodgers endorses unless I think it's authentic and he really uses it. And so there has to be that connection where it's, like I said, it's authentic and it's real. The brand, when you talk about authenticity, the brand came to market with these massive life-size vinyl decals, right? And it was the hottest thing. And the stories that I get told is that, you weren't cool unless you had a fat head, and where we've kind of evolved that you're not a real fan unless you have a fat head. And so again, we have all these different products and SKUs and stuff, but it all boils down to, I mean, your original question, Zach. Athletes are just, we want to make sure they're high character individuals and they represent our brand in a very, positive way and positive light. But athletes are amazing people and they have a very unique skill set, just like musicians do and just like a lot of other, professionals do. And so we're known as a sports brand. We're getting into music and we're getting into gaming and we're getting into collectibles and all that stuff. But at its core, Fathead's known as being a sports brand, and we're really leaning into that. We're not trying to be something we're not. Of course, we want to make money and we want to give consumers what they want. That's the key to business. You got to give consumers what they want. And so you're looking at trends that are happening. To Wendy's point, you want to stay ahead of trends, whether that's from a product innovation standpoint, a technology standpoint, AI, like you got to get ahead of the curve. We're using AI in a big way for our business, which is great. But yeah, I see what brands like Poppy did, right? Or Stanley. Stanley went from 70 million to 750 million by, getting these mom influencers. And you got to be smart. Like, what I say all the time is parents tend to be gatekeepers of the household, more specifically women, moms. So you got to market to moms. I mean, our demographic of our business is 50-50 men to women, which is pretty shocking. But you have to market. You got to live in these channels where consumers are at. You got to talk to them in the right way, and you got to be where they shop. It's pretty, it's the X's and O's of business. And so I think athletes are great ambassadors. I think they're the access. I was just in Florida with a big athlete community, and the access to deals now for athletes is awesome, to get into venture and even private equity and ownership of sports teams. But at its core, they're very good ambassadors if it's the right person and the brand aligns with the values.
I want to talk about AI with each of you, but I want to hit on a point you made, Chris, about deal access, because this is an investment conference. So I didn't even mention this when we started. So I run a venture debt fund, which is basically making loans to early stage companies that are predominantly venture backed. So just think about like high growth, innovative companies, right? And these types of folks, right? And the key to that market, I mean, there's many keys. And if you want to read about it, actually write a column each month for Venture Capital Journal, which is now in its 25th month. So 2 years of writing about venture debt. Then the book's coming probably in a year or two, so you can read all about it in one place. But one of the keys to that market, the private markets, alternative investments, which is what everybody wants nowadays, is deal origination. Right? How are you going to source the best opportunities? Because they're not going to pop up on your Bloomberg. Right? They're oftentimes very relationship driven. There's very little access to information in venture capital and private equity. So, Chris, maybe we start with you actually, because you've got experience working at hedge funds and in the investing industry. How does being an influencer create that kind of access? Because we're seeing a lot of the athletes now start their own venture capital firms, for instance, and they're doing it earlier and earlier in their careers, right? It's like they get a big contract, and instead of spending it on something silly, they're like, all right, I'm going to get a really good investment team around me and build out a fund complex, and they get the best looks because they're famous and they have access. So maybe talk a little bit about what access creates in terms of creating alpha opportunities for investors.
Yeah, like I said, the access to deals has really grown significantly. I mean, I played from '96 to 2007, and I invest in stocks and bonds now. To your point, Zach, the Steph Currys of the world and Kevin Durant's of the world and Saquon Barkley. You see what an amazing investor he's become because he has access. But at the end of the day, I watched the Saquon Barkley documentary, and I think he has access because he's an amazing human being, right? If he was not a great guy, not a great professional, I don't think he'd have that same access. So I think a lot of it boils down to, it's relationship driven. Cliche, people want to do business with the people they like and the people they trust. And so, money provides access, but only to a certain extent, in my opinion. And, I worked for a hedge fund for 11 years. I was a trader for 3 years, managing a trading desk. And I get these brokers on the call and I'm like, look, man, you can try to rip my face off in this one trade, but I want to do 100 trades. Like, get on board. So I think access is, in my opinion, very relationship driven. Sometimes you got to get lucky and be in the right place at the right time. But I also think you have to be a professional and earn that access. And again, follow through on that access, and you see the great ones doing it. Saquon Barkley is a good example. I was blown away by looking at his documentary, some of the stuff he's invested in, but you also look at what an amazing professional athlete he is, and what a great human being and dad, and so access for me boils down to relationships and then doing the right thing all the time.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how important integrity is. I was a bond trader too, so I was a bond trader at Deutsche Bank on the sell side back when we were the biggest bank in the world at 60 Wall. Then I was a bond trader and PM at Sun Life. We managed 150 billion, just in our like general account, over $1 trillion in terms of the firm, right? And to your point, it's kind of like game theory in that it's a game that's repeated many times. So you're always balancing this zero-sum game at the time of the trade, right? Like, I'm going to win on this trade, you're going to lose. But somehow over the course of many hundreds of trades, we both have to gain. So that's the balance, right? And I think, I experienced that hundreds of times every day as a trader, as you did. But in terms of private markets where deals are bigger and slower and take months, it's still the same thing, because I might show somebody a deal today that doesn't fit them, but they might like the deal that I show them 3 years from now, right? And if I screw them over today on something, they're never going to want to see any of the other opportunities in the future. And I think what I've been seeing a lot in the market is there is a breakdown in integrity. And behind the scenes in the private credit market, you guys should listen to this closely if you're serious about your portfolio performance. The lawyers that work on the corporate deals are very, very busy in their restructuring and workout groups right now. Okay, like the busiest groups in every law firm right now are fixing broken deals. But because these are private deals, the market's not really seeing them. And when a lot of these lawyers work on deals with me, and they tell me, man, I'm spending 80% of my time on workouts, right? These are people that usually are just doing like new originations, and they're spending all their time working out bad deals. And so, of course, I'm very curious about, well, what's going on? What's causing all these problems? Because I want to know, in the US and Canada, where we also invest, similar markets in many respects, but also disconnected. But it's the same in both markets. And what they're telling me is that they're seeing a breakdown in integrity and how people act in times of stress. Because you have contracts, but contracts don't mean anything if they're not honored. And you can try to enforce them, but it's very, very expensive, very time consuming. Nobody wants to do that. You wind up spending all your time trying to prevent a little bit of a loss, and the opportunity cost of that is huge in terms of new business that you're not going after. And so that's been very interesting to me, because I've been thinking about due diligence and how do you handicap and diligence someone's integrity ex ante, before you've given them the money. How do you know how they're going to act after they have the money? And to me, like that's going to be the key to what drives good investment performance in the private markets, is the integrity of the borrowers, or whoever, you are all very high integrity, right? So that's why you're all going to do really well, because people know that and they trust you, because you've got decades of experience proving that, right? The track records of high integrity. So even if you fail at something, like even if your business didn't make it, you would get another shot, because people know that you're smart, you're hardworking, you do what you say you're going to do. So I just felt like that's something worth emphasizing, because as I talk to the smartest people in the market behind the scenes, that's what they're focused on, right? they don't care about where stocks are going. They're talking about the integrity of the entire market underpinning trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of investments. So I just wanted to bring that up. It's a little bit off topic, but to me, that's what I'm thinking about as an investor. So when you're thinking about, okay, how do I invest in these innovative companies, right? How do I invest in Wendy's company, Dave's company, and Chris's company? What do I look for in early stage founders? Or not that you guys are early stage, you're all very experienced and successful, but in the VC space, you're really investing in the person and the team as much as anything else, right? Because they don't have a track record. And so that's why I think you guys will all be successful, because you have that integrity. And that's what I would advise people on the investment side to think about. Don't follow the shiny object. Everybody's got an AI company, and we'll talk about AI next. But it's really about what are you going to do with that, and what are you going to do when things go bad? Because there's going to be times when the business isn't developing the way you want. There's going to be massive amounts of stress on the business model. There's going to need to be cuts of various sorts, right? And what you don't want to cut is corners. And so that's the one thing I wanted to get out there today is just that when I look at companies, that's the number one thing I'm looking at now is, are the founders and CEOs going to do what they say they're going to do? Everything else doesn't even really matter in a sense. It doesn't. It's all about, are they going to be able to act with integrity throughout? So with that, now we're going to talk about innovation and AI, because that's why everybody's here, right? Wendy, let's start with you, because what you're doing with AI is going to be game changing. And then we'll go kind of to Dave and Chris, and then we'll open it up to questions after we talk about AI.
Great. Well, I just wanted to say bravo to what you just said about integrity, and I think it's very connected in with authenticity as a general rule. So MusicSoul is using AI to drive mass promotion from brands to users through data-driven matches that is baked into our system. And so when you think about why that's important, there is not a person on earth who has a business who doesn't want eyeballs on it. Mass promotion is the one thing that everyone wants, whether you're an athlete, an artist, any kind of business. If you're selling hats and socks, you want data-driven eyeballs to that business to see and know what you're doing. Eyeballs that will care about it. And so we have the ability through our AI data matching system to throw 100 million eyeballs at your music or your videos or your brand through our system. And then we're automating that engagement and giving the users 70% of streaming and advertising revenue. So right now, as I mentioned earlier, if you have 1 billion streams, either as an influencer, you don't have to necessarily be a musician or an artist, any kind of brand that's putting a video out there on social media to advertise whatever it is they're selling, they're going to get they're going to now receive 70% of all streaming and advertising off the top. And it took an artist like myself and a technologist like my partner to be generous enough to give away 70% off the top in order to monetize media. Now, there's no other platform, to my knowledge, that gives away advertising revenue. That is typically, taken by the Instagrams of the world and the YouTubes. We're changing the game and creating an ecosystem so that there's several more, we have over 80 different engagement functions. So right now, if you looked on Spotify, for example, even if you owned 100% of your song, who's ever going to find you unless your record label's paying for you to be at the top spot, which happens? No one's going to find you. And so 100% of nothing equals nothing. So now, if you've got, this is a discovery platform, if you've got 150, 250 million eyeballs being directed at your content, whatever you can capture and keep, you are going to make a real living. We are going to employ millions and millions of people through AI. So this is finally going to be not only a life raft for artists, content creators, users, but brands came to us with this problem and said, guess what? None of our traditional means of advertising are working anymore. There are no commercials on Netflix. There are no commercials on Apple TV. And banner ads or a logo slap on digital is no longer effective at engaging our audience. And we're scared of losing our 100 million opt-in users, said the chief marketing officer of Home Depot to my business partner. That's exactly what they said. And the same with Estee Lauder and Fanatics and a whole bunch of these huge brands that don't want to lose their core base and want to expand. And so this gives them activations, over 17 different ways to engage with their consumer after Home Depot closes, as an example, and people are scrolling through it, 11:30 at night, and can still engage those consumers in things that they'll be passionate about. So we're really excited to use AI for mass promotion, for data matching, and to actually employ millions of people through this technique.
What I thought was so incredible when you were telling me about this model, when you were first building it out, was that these large corporations were coming to you.
Yeah.
It wasn't that you were going to them, pitching them. They were coming to you saying, Wendy, we don't know how to access our customers anymore. Like, do we get influencers? Do we put it on TV? Like, nobody listens to radio anymore. Do we use podcasts? Do we put up a billboard?
Exactly. If you put up a billboard on the side of the road, lots of cars might see you, but they're not data-driven eyeballs. So how many of those people are going to care about that billboard? That's the beauty of this AI matching system, because we know that the two parties we're bringing together will care about one another.
So Dave, with what you're envisioning for the next step, which is really the big tech build out, what's the big picture?
The big picture.
It's transformative.
I mean, the big picture is just to kind of revolutionize this creator economy, because it will give ownership and control and value back to the creators. It's pretty simple in that sense. The technology exists right now. There are platforms that have this kind of technology and ability to be more equitable in how social media or other forms of media are consumed and distributed, but they don't have eyeballs. Nobody, the big companies are not, rushing to start giving away ownership and share of revenue that they're making from this creator economy, but we're heading in that direction where.
I want to ask you about this idea of using blockchain to determine who adds value along the chain, right, of distribution, because to me, I'm kind of a little bit of a crypto hater and blockchain hater, because people have been talking about it for like 15 years and it still hasn't solved any problem except for criminals, right? Like, hey, now we can traffic in drugs and people more easily. But aside from, in terms of like the real economy, it hasn't really lived up to the hype. But this actually could be a real use case where you can say, okay, now we can actually track where all this content is going, who's viewing it, and then determine how much value should go to each participant along that whole chain. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, because to me that's revolutionary, because right now it seems like there's all this information everywhere and we don't know how the heck to monetize it. I mean, look at like OpenAI. They're just like taking everything that's ever been written, taking it for themselves. There's they're infringing on everybody's copyrights, and there's no way to stop that in a sense. So that I think the creative community is rightfully very, very worried about what they're going to do when you've got books that can be written by AI overnight, and movies that can be produced, and music even, right? But if there's a way to track it from inception with the immutable blockchain that everybody talks about,
Yeah,
that could change the game.
100%. I mean, that's why I've been very much focused on it over this year. You know, I'm based in Chicago, and there's a pretty robust technology industry there, and a lot of technology startups that have come out of Chicago. So I've been, doing a lot of meetings and getting to know folks, that are very much more knowledgeable about this stuff than I am. But yeah, I mean, it's like, you see it every day. We can make a video right now. I could film us doing something that's so funny, and I post it on my Instagram, and by tonight, 20 million people around the world might have seen that, and it got shared here, got shared there. I'm going to go to my Instagram, and I might have a bunch of likes, and maybe I made $1.29. But that content that's going out, and millions of people are viewing and enjoying, there's money being made from that all over, but it's just not coming back to the creator. So I do think that this is a use case for blockchain that can be extremely powerful, because imagine if every time somebody liked your photo, you made 1 cent or a half a cent, whatever it is. But if you were able to track, every time somebody shares my post, I'm making this much. Every time somebody watches it for more than 60 seconds, I make this, and it's transparency and equitable share of value. So I think that this can be revolutionary, and that's what hip hop, like I was saying before. I mean, it always has. It started as something. It started as a response to poverty in New York City, and a way for young people to express themselves. It's always been a form of expression. But as it matured in the 80s, like I said, that this golden era is when the kind of social, political, economic thinking started to really come into the music and the culture, and birth, generations of entrepreneurs now, and things like that.
You made me think that not only can you, what you're really saying in a sense is, to Chris's point earlier about this being an attention economy, right? Like that's what we're tracking, right? In terms of being able to say, okay, how much attention was spent on content, right, along the chain, and then how much is that worth? And of course, we don't, there's going to be different models that are developed and to determine, okay, how much is each step worth? But it's really determining, okay, with all these eyeballs in a certain amount of finite time, how do we determine what's valuable, and also how do we track, how their attention is being allocated? And also, last thought here is, and then I want to go to you, Chris, about the attention economy, is it can also help track ideas, right? So I think right now we're in this kind of market where ideas seem to not belong to people anymore. It used to be that if you had an idea, you were given credit for it, right? You're like, oh, I invented this. Like I invented the Eugene Fama and Kenneth French, developed a pricing model for equities, and they've been given credit for it for the last whatever it is, 3 or 4 decades. Nowadays, I could put something out that I developed, and the next day I'll have 50 guys on LinkedIn saying they built it, right? And so I think this idea of not only tracking attention, but tracking idea ownership and content ownership is going to be very key, because right now there's not a lot of respect for people's intellectual property rights, quite frankly, right? It's not just it's not just certain countries that don't have respect for it. It's, I think, even in the U.S. there's not really much respect for people's intellectual property anymore. But Chris, I want to turn it to you to talk about how you guys are using AI, but also just your general data-driven approach, because to me that was one of the most impressive things about what you did when you came in there, is you basically you just mapped the business down to every single number, and you can rattle all these off like almost nobody I've ever seen before. So it's super impressive. So talk a little bit about what you're doing on the data side and the AI side.
Yeah, I mean, my overall feeling is you can't track what you don't measure. You can't market unless you know your consumer. I'll give you a story. I was outside. We have a management meeting, our call every Thursday afternoon at 2:00. And so, I try to empower the team to come up with really, creative ideas or good ideas, whether it's a product idea or a marketing idea or, whatever it is. But that idea has to have an ROI associated with it. And so, our CTO raised his hand virtually and he's like, hey, what do you guys think? There's so many amazing things going on right now with these AI influencers. And he's like, shows us 3 or 4 videos. And I was like, look, I think the technology is getting better. It's not where it needs to be, but like, does that align with the core values of our brand? Is that authentic? Like that's not going to happen anytime soon for Fathead. So on a positive note, we've really used AI in a big way to make our business just a lot more efficient. And the example of that is, we're building this golden database of fandom, we call it. And all of our Shopify information and all of our Facebook information and Google information or Pinterest information, everything's kind of coming up to this golden database. And then we have these AI agents that are creating what we call personas, right? So that'll determine how we market to people. And Wendy, who's 29 years old and has, 2 kids and lives in Kansas City and they're Chiefs fans, and you start to understand your consumer a lot more. And Wendy's experience on the fathead.com website will be different than Zack's, will be different than Dave's, will be different than mine. We're getting different creative, different ads, different SMS, different email. That's data, but that's using AI in a very positive way to understand your consumers and know how to market to them. Now, we're also using AI to make our business a lot more efficient in that, what I say is you're using great people running great systems, meaning you don't need a marketing team of 20 anymore. You don't need a customer service team of 20 people anymore. You have great people running great systems that creates, efficiencies. And so that's helped us. What I say to investors all the time is that, we have a clear path to 100 million in revenue. And year 5, we'll probably do, forecasting to do 43 million in EBITDA. So that revenue and that EBITDA is climbing, but our OpEx won't climb at the same rate because we won't need what they had back in the day. It was 150 employees. We can run this pretty lean and mean, but we have to have really great systems and great people running those systems.
Yeah, I think about the marginal cost of scaling businesses, and it's low across the board, especially for those that can harness data and technology and AI. And I think about it for the asset management industry. I think it's gonna be transformative because AI is advancing so quickly now that what seemed impossible just like a year or 2 ago we can do today. And I'm already hearing some top firms are not even really hiring entry-level analysts anymore, or they're hiring a very, very small percentage because you don't really need that if you can tap into AI's capabilities. And I don't just mean ChatGPT. That's one application, but there's so many things that can be done in every part of the business, from like marketing, operations, sales, customer service, business development. And I think for the asset management industry, which was always very scalable, right? Because you can manage more money and not necessarily need that many more people, especially in public markets. I think it's going to make it almost like infinitely scalable. Like I think we're going to be seeing teams of 5 to 10 people that are managing billions, like quickly. Like I don't mean like in 10 years. I mean like you'll probably see my firm doing that within 3 years, and there's going to be others. And we're in the private markets, right? So imagine what you can do in the public markets. I remember the stat, like I forget the exact numbers, but it was something like Goldman Sachs back in early 2000s had something like 600 stock traders, right? And like 4 quants. And now they've got like, now it's like a fraction of that. They've got like 200 quants and like 4 traders, right? And that's gonna keep moving to the point where there's only a few senior people making decisions, a couple people to manage the machines, and then just great technology. But to your point, you're right, it's great people managing great technology, essentially.
Yeah.
But
I'm happy in sports because people aren't going to pay to see robots play football or soccer, right? So, there's going to be a lot of jobs that are at risk, but sports is so great that it's just the upper echelon of athleticism, and of course, running the organizations or operating the organizations, there's going to be AI and a lot of automation, but certainly not in sports.
Agreed. So let's open it up to questions. I think we've got, we might even be over time already. I'm sorry. Hey, just so you guys know, funny enough, I just realized this. We've all done podcasts together that were all really a lot of fun and pretty informative as well. So if you go to successunleashedshow.com, you can find more about all three of the guests if you want to learn more about their stories. So with that, let's take a couple quick questions and then we can get to the cocktails. We got one over here.
Yeah, so Funko does a lot of NFTs already, and in the music industry, I would say that's coming up pretty quickly. I would say the majors hold it back, like Spotify, just because the major record labels are involved. So I would say, like, are there any strategies on what you guys looking to do in the future on like pushing that ecosystem further?
So I want to make sure I understood the question. Pushing the ecosystem further of NFTs for music in the music industry? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, just in general, overall, like that's just a method that's been on distribution, on income from artists, fan members, music managers, pushing off that income to the whole player. That's like one aspect, and there's transformative within the whole ecosystem, the music side, the film side. You see a little bit of the Funko, the NFTs, some of the Funko heads. I would say it's very early right now.
Yeah, I mean, basically, and I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm going to do my best, but basically, we have functionality inside of our platform that, again, automates the engagement and then pays out every single user 70% of streaming and advertising. And even if you're not a content creator, if, let's say, like my mom is just like a mom, she's not a musician or a content creator, but she could share a John Mayer song and someone else could share it, someone else could share it. And if the last person purchases a John Mayer t-shirt, each person in that chain will get a commission off that t-shirt in varying rates depending on how close they are to the sale. So that has sort of an NFT-like effect or cryptocurrency-like chain, so to speak, where everybody gets paid. I hope that answers it.
All right. I don't think we have any more questions. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, guys.